Hello, I'm Kirk Dominic, President and CEO of the World Federation of Youth Clubs. I'd like to welcome you to today's episode of Youth Development Beyond Borders. We're excited today to be joined by some special guests from our partner, Saprea. I first want to give a special shout out to WFYC affiliates who are joining us around the world and welcome others as our guests as well. We're going to talk about a topic today that's a bit sensitive, but very real, and one that we should all be cognizant of in this youth development space. And that's the issue of child sexual abuse and the prevention and intervention. So I'm thrilled to welcome our friends from Saprea, Chris Yadon and Annie Hartvigsen. And I'd like to turn it over to those two to introduce themselves.
Kirk, thank you. It's so good to be with you, and we're grateful to have the time with you and with your audience. My name is Chris Yadon. I'm the Managing Director at Saprea, and I've been working with Saprea since day one. I was very first employee a little over 9 years ago. I love the work we do, and we're grateful we get to share this time with you.
Yeah, and my name is Annie Hartvigsen. I'm a global outreach strategist. I'm in our outreach department, and I've been with Saprea since 2018.
Well, welcome to you both. And again, thanks for joining us. So today's topic, child sexual abuse. Let me just start by saying, for those of us in the youth development world, this is our number one job. Every day we are entrusted with the lives of hundreds of thousands of young people around the world in WFYC affiliates. And there is no job more important than the protection of those young people and the safety of those young people. And so as we ventured out to find the right partners to provide practical tools and resources to those youth development workers and volunteers in our clubs, we were thrilled to find Saprea and what they bring to this area and to this concern. But Chris and Annie, first, I want to talk to you a little bit. As I said, this is a sensitive topic, right? You know that better than I do. And sometimes it's one that there's a lot of misconceptions or misdefinitions. So let's start by having you two kind of frame the issue of childhood sexual abuse, and maybe give us a little bit on kind of the scope of this issue around the world as you see it.
Maybe if it's okay, Kirk, I'll share just kind of a brief story, and I'll let Annie give a specific definition. Great. And then I'll come back and kind of close out with how the issue impacts the world. So I grew up pretty carefree, at least so I thought. I grew up on the edge of a fruit orchard, kind of one of those, if you were to paint an idealistic upbringing, I spent more time bare feet than with shoes on, playing in a fruit orchard, not really having many worries in the world. And this experience that I had was really idealistic for me. But around me, there was a lot of turmoil going on. I had several siblings experiencing different types of traumas, including abuse. And when I became a young adult, I began to realize that idealistic childhood I grew up in was true for me, but not true for my siblings. And that was really, really alarming to me. It was very disconcerting. And I remember being really, really angry and having those feelings of, this is not okay. It's not okay that my siblings went through this. It's not okay that as they went through it, people looked the other way or hid it or shoved it under the rug. It's not okay that society is allowing this to happen and not willing to talk about it. So that's when I really came to feel some passion around this particular issue and where it hit close to home. And the unfortunate thing is my story is not unique. My story is very, very common. Whether you're the survivor yourself or a sibling or a loved one of a survivor, this is a proximate issue. So I'll let Annie define the issue for us because I think that's important to define what it is. And then maybe I'll share a little bit about what's going on worldwide.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Definitions of child sexual abuse are different depending on where you are. There's not one agreed upon definition of what childhood sexual abuse is. However, it's really important for us to have a working definition to start fighting against it. And so at Saprea, we define child sexual abuse as any time an adult or a peer coerces or forces a kid or a teen into sexual activity. And that can include both physical and non-physical sexual activity. So it's that definition is helpful as we just call this what it is and what we're talking about.
That digital side. Sorry, Kurt, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think that kind of guidance is especially helpful for those youth workers on the front line in understanding what it is.
Right.
Yeah, and that digital side that Annie's talking about is really in the forefront of what we're dealing with now. We've always known about the more typical, or at least as we think about it, more typical type of abuse where touch is involved. But the type of abuse, particularly sexual abuse, where touch is not involved, and there's things going on digitally, is growing at an alarming rate, and it's growing worldwide. So as we think about the worldwide issue, UNICEF estimates that 294 million children worldwide have experienced child sexual abuse. I can't even wrap my head around that number. And the challenge with that, even that number and that estimate, is we do know from research that child sexual abuse is grossly underreported, both through official channels, but even through surveying and other types of reporting mechanisms. So if the number is 294 million, a little less than that, a little more than that, whatever it is horrific, it is broad, it is wide. And much like the story I shared at the beginning, it has proximity to every single one of us.
Yeah. So let's talk about, I love that Saprea talks publicly on your website about eradicating child sexual abuse. I like that type of aggressive action against such a serious issue. But you all have developed some incredibly useful, very practical tools that our WFYC affiliate clubs and quite frankly, anybody in the youth development space or youth education space would find useful. So take some time and talk about the tools you've developed and what's available in terms of resources for those out there working with young people every day.
Let me address that from a kind of a high-level strategic approach, and then I'll let Annie share a few specific examples so our listeners can get a taste of it. So we have a very strong bias here at Saprea that children can and should be educated to protect themselves, but more importantly, parents and other caregivers, including those involved in youth serving organizations, have a primary responsibility to be the ones that protect kids. It's not rational for us to accept a child who's going through their own developmental cycles to have the cognitive abilities to navigate such a complex topic by themselves. So while we do want the children to be educated, our bias and our strategic bias at Saprea is that at Saprea, we need to fill the role of empowering parents and other caregivers to reduce the risk of sexual abuse. And those caregivers come in a lot of different forms. Could be a teacher, could be a club leader, could be someone in a faith community, could be extended family. So that parent and then that immediate community around that child that's helping raise that child with those parents are the critical people to reach with prevention and protection resources.
Well said.
Thanks for framing that, Chris. And so then all of our actual resources are catered to help that immediate circle with tools and resources and activities that start to make a difference. And so one of the things that I love that I get to do as part of my job is our community education program. So Saprea has a few classes that parents, caregivers, and mentors can take that really rely on discussion and engaging discussion, and then concrete tools and information to help. And so these classes I love with this balance of discussion and information. It helps communities start to not only know broadly what they can do to reduce the risk of child sexual abuse, but then have really concrete conversations about what they can do within their communities and their families that start to make a difference. So we have those classes that are available, and they're free, and they're on our website, and people can access them. We teach them virtually monthly, or people can take our discussion guides and content and teach it in their communities. And so it's this amazing tool that gets conversation started, which is so critical. And then we're continually just trying to make these resources more available to individuals. So we have a vast library of online prevention tools as well, videos and information, statistics on many different topics that talk about prevention and supporting and responding. And those are available through saprea.org as well, totally free for individuals to use and access.
One other quick thought I'll share, Kurt, related to this is what we're not. I think it's important for people to understand what we're not. So we are not the 30-minute online training to check the legal checkbox. There are lots of other organizations that do that and do that well, and we don't feel the need to fill that niche. We're the next level of education that goes beyond just checking that the legal checkbox and those base tactics for protection that really help a community engage and understand the core principles behind prevention. So no matter what threat is coming at the children, they know how to then reflexively or automatically apply those principles to their specific culture, circumstance, environment, or situation that child might be dealing with.
I like that. And so maybe talk a little bit about those core principles, if you don't mind, and tell our audience a little more about those, because this issue of finding a set of core principles that apply across cultures and countries and attitudes and behaviors is of significant importance for an organization like ours that spans 45 countries and a number of cultures and attitudes and behaviors.
Yeah, so I think the best way for us to tackle that is talk about what we refer to as the top 5 ways to reduce the risk. So we've distilled it down into 5 core principles that we view as the most important principles that guide a parent or caregiver to protect a child no matter what type of threats coming at them as it relates to sexual abuse. The first one is learning how to assess risky situations. So that particular principle is basically helping that mentor, that club leader, or that parent have a sensitivity to what things could be a risk, like a grooming behavior or a pattern of behaviors as they see someone else interact with the child that they're like, hey, something's not right there. So that assess risky situations principle helps them kind of tune in and have that particular sensitivity to those types of risks. The second is helping children learn how to set and hold healthy boundaries, as well as helping you as parents or caregivers or club leaders or mentors learn how to set and hold boundaries. And this one has a dual purpose. It's both to help reduce the risk that the child will be abused, but just as importantly, it's to reduce the risk that the child will be the one that abuses another child. A little over half of child sexual abuse from the research we have is minor on minor. So think a 14, 15-year-old abusing a 7, 8, 9-year-old, or a teen on teen sexual assault. So it's as much about solving this problem is as much about reducing the risk for the child that they'll be abused and reducing the risk that the child will be the one to abuse. So really understanding boundaries, how to set them, hold them, honor them, respect them is critical. The third principle is open communication. So how do you open communication with a child to remove barriers for them to disclose if there's something going on that's uncomfortable to them? And this part of prevention is what we often refer to as early intervention. Let's see if we can get that open communication around uncomfortable topics with the child. if they can disclose to me that, hey, I didn't like how that person hugged me, it allows us to intervene then, as opposed to waiting for that grooming to continue until something more serious occurs. The next one is discussing sexual development. And this one could be a little more sensitive for club leaders, depending on where you live and whether it's appropriate for a club leader to be involved in this particular part. But from a parent standpoint, this one is uber critical. And that is opening up dialogue around sexual health and sexual development. One of the most common things we hear from survivors that we help with our healing programs is, I was being abused and I didn't know it was abuse. I thought it was normal. And it's because they don't have any context in terms of what's healthy and what's not healthy from a sexual development standpoint. The last one is practicing emotional well-being. And that's both you as the caregiver, whether that's a club leader again or a parent, as well as helping to develop and nurture emotional well-being in a child so that they can tap in and understand their emotions, be able to express what emotions they're experiencing. Again, helping to open up that dialogue so that you can intervene if there is something at risk. So those are the 5 principles that guide our core curriculum.
Very helpful. Very helpful. So, within the World Federation of Youth Clubs network or family, as I said, 20,000 youth workers or volunteers out there running club activities every day, trying to find the balance, right, between fun and supervision and guided education. And if I'm a youth worker in one of these clubs, regardless of the country, what are some of the kind of leading indicators that a child may be the victim of childhood sexual abuse, that I should be looking for? What are the signs? What are some of the things I should be looking for?
Annie, let's have you take this one, if that's okay, and share your thoughts.
Yeah, so what's hard is that a lot can be at play when behavior changes in a kid, but signs that you're looking for are maybe a kid who has been previously really active and engaged with other friends, changes personalities quickly, maybe gets more isolated and more lonely, and you feel like there's been a behavior shift there. Similarly, some more tangible warning signs can be things like if the kid in your care starts coming with torn clothing, or their image shifts, or you're noticing like body harm and things like that. So there's going to be both the kind of physical things that you're looking for, but mainly what you're looking for are some of those behavior changes. If there's changes like that. With younger kids, you're looking for things like maybe they start wetting their pants more. There's different biological things happening that feel out of the norm. And this list can be long, so I think one of the major things is you're looking for stark differences that happen quickly. Chris, what would you add?
Yeah, so I'll share a few more examples, maybe 2. I'll share one from a younger child and then one from a teen. So if we took a younger child and you noticed all of a sudden, kind of speaking to what Annie's talking about, the shift, they are really, really sensitive to any type of touch. And I'm not talking about inappropriate touch. I'm talking about normal, everyday touch. That would be a key physical and behavioral sign that, hey, something's going on there, that they've shifted just like that. So, you might go up and, place your hand on their shoulder as, you're encouraging them, and they bristle. That would be an example of one of those types of shifts with a physical sign. Now, thinking about teens, one thing that's got high correlation between child sexual abuse specifically, but really any type of trauma, is self-harm. So when you see teens shift into self-harm behavior, that can be, everything from things like self-harm, like cutting, or significant suicidal ideation. That it doesn't guarantee that they're going through trauma, because there's other reasons why teens can also do self-harm, but the corollary between abuse and self-harm is really, really high. And so it's one of the things that would pop into my head as a volunteer, a club leader. If I saw a child participating in self-harm, I'd be like, something might be going on there. Maybe I ought to see where I can help.
Okay, super helpful. So I do want to pause there and mention the resources again that are available on saprea.org. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe those are available in multiple languages. Is that right?
Yeah, so all of our resources are available in English, Spanish, French, and German.
Fantastic. So I want to go back to something that I think was mentioned in part of the opening comments, and that's this whole not new anymore, but this whole area of what I would refer to as digital predators, right? Technology is a fantastic thing. It is leveling the playing field in a lot of cases for young people around the world, introducing them to the rest of the world and new skill sets and new experiences. But unfortunately, it's also introducing them or opening them up from a vulnerability standpoint to the dark side of technology. And so talk a little bit about Saprea's efforts or resources or tools you have specifically in this space of, online safety.
Yeah, it's a great question. And my answer at first might sound a little counterintuitive, but I think it's really important to make a point here. So those 5 principles I shared earlier, the reason why we at Saprea focus on principles is they're applicable no matter what type of abuse is coming at you, whether in person or digital. And even within those 2 realms, like digital abuse as an example, it's morphing and changing faster than we can even imagine. And I'll give you an example in just a minute. But again, those principles, if we really will dig in and learn the principles as mentors, as club leaders, as parents, we will be better equipped to deal with the constant and continuous change that technology is throwing at us. So let me just give you 2 examples. So within the last 5 years alone, sextortion has skyrocketed. So what's sextortion? Very simply shared, sextortion most commonly occurs when a teen, so let's just say a 13-year-old girl, takes a nude picture, shares it with a boyfriend. There's a breakup. That boyfriend might share it with a few friends. At some point, a criminal hacks into one of their systems, gets a hold of the image. And now that criminal comes back to that 13-year-old girl, says, I have this nude image of you. And if you don't either meet me for sexual favors, send me more nudes, or send me money, I'm going to blast this all over the school. I have your whole contact list as well. So the internet crimes against children teams, both here in the US and globally, are dealing with this in high volume. It's overtaken their work. It's spiking. It's happening in every type of socioeconomic environment. And these criminals are extorting these children. Now, going back to the principles, those 5 principles are core to solving sextortion, even though sextortion is a relatively new issue. For example, if I as a club leader, I as a parent have really open communication, the likelihood that the child will tell me that they're being extorted so I can intervene before additional harm is being done goes up tremendously. If I don't have that open communication, that 13-year-old girl is like, I'm going to find that $200 no matter what I have to do, because I do not want this blasted around the whole school. Now, speaking to how technology is morphing, over the last year, we're seeing a surge in now AI-generated images. So now they don't even need a nude picture of the 13-year-old. They just need a picture of her with her face, and they can, through AI, create a nude image, but they're still going to go extort her. They're going to say, they're going to send this picture to her and say, hey, I've got this nude image, and I'm going to send it all over the school. If you don't give me sexual favors, send me more nudes, or send me money. So that's just one small example. So again, I want to emphasize, yes, we do have specific resources and education around, let's say, sextortion, but more importantly than the specific tools around sextortion are those core principles, because they help parents, club leaders, volunteers respond to the changes in technology faster than we can put resources out. Because a parent reflexively knows what to do. They know how to engage with their child no matter what the threat is. So yes, the specific resources for online perpetration are there. They're important, but I don't want to paint the image that they overtake or are more important than the core principles that underlie those specific tactics.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It's what a shame that the more sophisticated this world becomes, the higher level of dangers and disappointments that our young people are facing. And so I'm going to say again, we have one top priority in the youth development world, and that is the protection of our children. And again, we're very grateful to Saprea for the very practical and user-friendly resources that you have brought to our family of youth clubs around the world. Give me an example, or maybe share with the audience one of the more successful ways you've seen these resources used by an organization, whether that's a youth club or a school or a parent group, or give the audience a real life take on best practice use of some of these resources.
I'll share one that I love, Annie, and if you have one you want to add, I'll make mine quick so you have time to add one. So we have a partner, a youth serving organization that specifically focuses on youth with neurodiversity, and even more specifically, primarily with youth that have autism. So what they did is that youth club had a couple of their staff members get trained in our community education that Annie talked about earlier. And they do a lot of programming for the youth themselves, but they also have programming for the entire family and do parents' nights and things like that. So they got trained in our curriculum, and now they have the ability to deliver that curriculum to the family or to the parent multiple times a year. And the great thing about this is it's helping them not only enhance their own programming, but helps them solve a core issue, because children with disabilities, particularly those with communication disabilities, are over 3 times more likely to experience sexual abuse than those that do not have those disabilities. So it hit a core need for their demographic. It enhanced their programming and gave them more credibility with the very people that they were serving. And the most important is anybody that's involved in youth serving organizations do it because they love kids. Right. So, and they got to better protect the children that they serve. So there's kind of a real tangible example of one. Annie, I don't know if you have any others you would like to share.
I would love to share one that's similar, but with a different community. So where you all are so worldwide, another organization that I've worked with is a group in Uganda, and they help kids with after-school programming and also supporting parents. And so we did similar, our community education, we talked about the top 5 ways to reduce the risk with their team and did this training and talked through concepts. And then they have programming where they go out and have parent groups and talk with different parents. And they were able to go and teach these 5 concepts and have conversations in their community. And why I feel like this is such a success is because there are going to be cultural differences. There are going to be, the classroom looks different. They're out teaching outside in open air with food. And they've been able to take these concrete topics that make a difference and then make it applicable to their community and have those conversations that are going to be very specific to their kids and what they're seeing in a format that makes sense for them. And so that's another cool way that we see these collaborations, and we couldn't do this work without partners and these individuals that have connections with their community and are teaching already.
Two great examples. Thank you. And I hope that our affiliates who are listening will take those and try to replicate those in their communities. There's this much quoted saying about it takes a village to raise a child. Well, that can easily be interpreted. It takes a village to protect a child. and having those community conversations and parent groups and kind of multiplying the message in wherever your community is, I think is of the utmost importance. How do we do that with groups of authority? How do we raise this issue and the solutions with government groups or other international entities or authoritative bodies? I mean, how do we raise this to the level of attention that it deserves, I guess?
Yeah, so this question specifically is actually where I do most of my personal work. So I'm very, very passionate about this particular topic. I will say I'm going to give an answer, but this topic is robust enough. We could probably spend an hour talking about just this one question, but I'll give the high level summary. So there's something referred to as societal change theory, and it's, in short, it's the way that broad movements happen in any type of society, whether that society is a small, village level society or as large as an entire country or even the world. The principles that govern societal change are very, very similar. In short, there are 5 principles. There's 9 actors, meaning 9 types of people that need to get involved to deploy these principles. And then there are very specific how-tos that you follow in order to drive change within a society. I think for today, I'll just share what those 5 principles are. The how-to is a lot more complex and would take a lot more time, but we'll hit on the 5 principles. So the first is policy. There has to be people engaged and involved in policy work, whatever that looks like in your country, whatever that looks like in a municipal level, all the way up to a country level. So there has to be work in policy. There has to be organized activism. And what that means is agencies, so NGOs, businesses, any type of organized groups that have to actually do activism both with the public as well as with policymakers. The third is grassroots activism. And this is the one that often gets missed the most. And that is your influential people at the neighborhood or small community level. So when we're talking about that kind of core community around that child, there are people that are influencers. You already know who they are in your community. They're already vocal about other things. Those people have to be engaged in the movement. The next one is issue awareness. So there's no big societal change that has occurred without broad and large issue awareness campaigns. So those happen through multimedia, traditional media, television, radio, advertising, digital media, so social media, websites, blogs, those happen there. And then the last one is organic marketing. And what we refer to as organic marketing is when those who are news media and larger influencers pick up the issue without you paying them to do so. So when news media is reporting on the topic continuously, when athletes, so maybe a top soccer player in a country, or an actor or some sort of big influencer is willing to talk about the issue and pick up the baton of that issue without being paid to do so. That's that last organic marketing. So those 5 principles those levers have to be pulled in order to bring about societal change. There's 9 actors that do it. I won't go through that because we don't really have time for all of it today. And then there's some specific steps you follow that are part of the how-to. But this societal change theory is the driver for how you bring about change. And maybe at some point, if it makes sense, we could talk again about that particular topic.
Thank you for that, Chris. And Chris and Annie, thank you for joining us today. What I think we've all brought light to here is this is a very serious and growing issue. And while it can be sensitive, it's one that deserves discussion and deserves attention. And the good news for our WFYC affiliates and others out there is that Saprea is here with practical, hands-on, usable resources available at no charge, research-based, proven to be effective, that can help us all in doing, as I've said a number of times, job number one, which is protecting the young people in our care. So I want to thank you two for joining us today. I want to give you an opportunity to share any closing thoughts with the audience or anything that we haven't touched on that you think would be important to talk about.
I'll go ahead and take that one and share a closing thought. So here's, as I, look at club leaders of any type, here's what I really want them to know. The primary protection around a child when it comes to child sexual abuse has to be the immediate family. But the immediate family by themselves is not going to get the job done. We have to have that second layer, and that is the communities the child engages with. Now, think about this. If I have a parent that's protecting their child and is educated, I have two eyes on that child. But when I start educating the youth club leaders, the volunteers, the faith communities, the schools, all that next layer around that child, now I have hundreds of eyes watching that child wherever they go and reducing risk for that child. So that next layer of protection exponentially increases the protection for that child. So the youth serving organizations, the club leaders, their level of protection is not a nice to have. It's essential to make movement on this issue. So we're just grateful to World Federation of Youth Clubs for giving us the opportunity to share our resources with you important individuals that are so critical to these children's lives. I grew up with scouting. I grew up in a faith organization that had youth clubs. I grew up in youth sports. I get the importance of those environments, and I'm grateful to you that you're helping us protect these children.
Thank you. Well, we are equally thankful for the partnership. I'll say one last time, please check out these resources and tools available on saprea.org. I would also encourage our audience to follow the World Federation of Youth Clubs across social media and online. And I'd also encourage you to join us for future episodes of Youth Development Beyond Borders, where we will continue to bring conversations around critical topics and resources on addressing those topics. In addition, a number of our episodes will be Dreamers to Achievers, where we will share with you the real life stories, success stories of some amazing young people and adults who have accomplished big things and are driving change in their community. So thank you for your interest in the World Federation of Youth Clubs and to Saprea for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.